Have you ever stopped to think about how many times injustice goes unnoticed right under our noses? Imagine an apparently elegant environment where false smiles mask the cruelest of prejudices, and a single action can crumble an entire structure of silent discrimination. What would you do if you witnessed an act of racism so explicit that it screams louder than the deafening silence of omission? In this video, you will discover how a son transformed a moment of humiliation into a lesson that will shake your worldview. A story that will make you rethink every social interaction and understand that true power lies in the courage to confront what is wrong, no matter how comfortable it may seem. Not the yum. On a sunny day in San Francisco, Mrs. Maria Santos's elegance caught the attention of everyone present, like a beacon of dignity amidst the urban hustle. At 68 years old, she carried a story of resistance and empowerment that translated into every movement, every glance, every breath. Her delicately embroidered navy blue outfit was not just clothing, but a symbol of identity and the fight against centuries of oppression. The subtle details of the embroidery told stories of overcoming, each stitch representing a silent battle against the prejudice that stubbornly persisted. The Chez Lumière restaurant exuded sophistication in every inch of its modern architecture, with champagne-colored walls that seemed to whisper secrets of California's high society. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, like silent witnesses to meetings and conversations that could change destinies. The atmosphere was a mix of refinement and tension, where every detail seemed calculated to impress and at the same time create invisible barriers of class and race. The waiters moved like actors on a meticulously prepared stage, each movement calculated to maintain the illusion of perfection. The ambiance was a living portrait of the complex social dynamics of San Francisco. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" asked the receptionist, a young blonde whose smile was more of a professional mask than a genuine expression of cordiality. Her tone carried subtle nuances of discomfort, revealing the first signs of a microaggression that hung in the air like an uncomfortable fog. Maria, with her unwavering politeness and sharp intelligence, noticed every nuance of the interaction, every small gesture that revealed the underlying prejudice. "Yes, under the name Santos," she replied, her voice soft yet firm, carrying with it decades of experience navigating spaces where she was not always welcome. Her gaze, serene yet penetrating, seemed to pierce through the surface of formality, silently challenging any attempt at diminishment. So, in an instant, waiter Jake Miller became the protagonist of a scene that would reveal the backstage of discrimination at the heart of a luxury restaurant. His tall, athletic body moved between the tables with calculated grace, distributing smiles and attention to the customers he deemed suitable for that environment. Jake's quick glances and strategic movements denoted a selectivity that went far beyond simple professional service, representing a cruel portrait of the social inequality rooted in every gesture. Mrs. Santos observed everything with a calm that bordered on ancestral wisdom, witnessing yet another chapter of a story that would repeat countless times in different scenarios. Jake deliberately passed by her table, completely ignoring her presence, as if she were an invisible object in the midst of that refined environment. Each time he crossed her line of sight, it was like a silent declaration that she did not belong in that space, a microaggression that screamed louder than any word. Unamata. The other customers, mute witnesses to that scene, exchanged quick and embarrassed glances, some pretending not to notice, others clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The hypocritical tolerance of that environment seemed to weigh more than any sense of justice or humanity. Interesting how prejudice dresses in elegance, Maria thought, her dignity intact in the face of that grotesque display of discrimination. Jake continued his calculated dance among the tables, alternating between wide smiles for some and total invisibility for others, a true maestro of social injustice disguised as restaurant service. Carlos Santos observed the scene with a calm that concealed a storm of emotions, his corporate posture revealing years of experience managing not only restaurants but complex human conflicts. Every movement of waiter Jake was like a piece of a perverse theater of discrimination, which Carlos knew as well as the lines of his establishment's menu. His eyes, trained to capture the smallest details in million-dollar negotiations, were now focused on the inhumane treatment directed at his own mother, a woman who represented to him much more than kinship. She was a symbol of resistance and dignity. Now, the table where Carlos was seated was strategically positioned to observe every detail of the interaction, like a director watching from the wings of a show that was about to reveal its true essence. His glass of mineral water remained untouched. His hands lightly crossed over the table, creating an image of apparent tranquility that contrasted completely with the inner storm. The decision to let the waiter fully expose his character was not born of impulsiveness, but of a calculated strategy that mixed social justice with a pedagogical lesson about respect and equality. The waiters and staff passing near Carlos had no idea of the silent revolution that was about to unfold, nor did they realize that every second of that scene would be a masterclass on discrimination and power. His gaze was like a laser, capable of dissecting every movement, every expression of Jake, transforming that moment into a true behavioral audit. True leadership is not about shouting, but about making everyone reflect, Carlos thought, his mind already preparing for the confrontation that would be more than a simple reprimand. It would be a cultural transformation within his own restaurant. The moment of confrontation arrived like thunder on a seemingly calm day, with Carlos rising from his table with an elegance that captured the attention of everyone present at Chez Lumière. His walk was calculated, each step laden with an authority that went far beyond being the owner of the establishment. It was the living manifestation of decades of struggle against racism and discrimination. The customers, until then engrossed in their conversations and sophisticated meals, began to realize that something extraordinary was about to happen, an expectant silence taking over the environment. Jake Miller, completely oblivious, continued his performance of selective ignorance, passing by Mrs. Santos's table again without even a greeting or a glance of acknowledgement. It was then that Carlos, with a voice that mixed authority and disappointment, pronounced the words that would turn that moment into an unforgettable lesson. "Jake, come here right now." The tone was calm, but it carried an intensity that made all eyes turn instantly to the unfolding scene, a true live lesson on dignity and respect. With surgical precision, Carlos publicly revealed that the elderly black woman, the target of so much disrespect, was his own mother. A strategy that exposed not only Jake's individual discrimination, but an entire, structural system of prejudice. "Do you think you can treat my mother, a woman who has built more success stories than you could ever dream of, as if she were invisible?" he declared, his voice echoing in every corner of the restaurant. The customers, witnesses to that moment, felt the weight of each word, some lowering their eyes in shame, others watching in admiration as Carlos transformed that confrontation into a masterclass on equality and respect. Jake Miller's dismissal was as swift and surgical as the confrontation that preceded it, becoming an emblematic moment of immediate justice. Carlos Santos, with a precise and unwavering motion, called the restaurant management to have Jake immediately removed from his duties, demonstrating that discrimination would not be tolerated in his establishment. The silence that followed was deafening, each person present understanding the gravity of the moment and the consequences of discriminatory acts. The scene unfolded like a movie, Jake being escorted out of the restaurant, his belongings quickly gathered, his expression a mix of shame and disbelief. At that moment, it became more than just a dismissal. It was a public declaration that respect and dignity are fundamental values that transcend any hierarchical position or social status. The other staff watched the scene, some with a mix of fear and admiration for Carlos's firm stance. The speed with which the situation was handled drew attention. Within minutes, Jake went from waiter to ex-employee, his professional career stained by an act of discrimination that would be documented and shared. The message was clear and direct. Prejudice would not be tolerated, no matter who the discriminatory agent was or in what environment it occurred. Carlos transformed that moment into a living lesson on integrity, social justice, and the power of confronting oppressive systems. Rachel, the manager of Chez Lumiere, called a meeting that would be more than just a routine gathering. It would be a true lesson on humanity and respect. Her eyes scanned each face of the staff, knowing that this moment would be a turning point in the organizational culture of the establishment. The room, once an environment of administrative routine, transformed into a space for deep reflection on the values that truly matter in any workplace. Every person who enters this restaurant deserves respect, regardless of their color, age, origin, or social status, Rachel declared, her firm voice echoing each word like a manifesto against discrimination. The employees, still impacted by the recent confrontation, listened to every syllable with an attention that went beyond professional obligation. It was a moment of true awareness. Personal stories of overcoming began to be shared, creating an atmosphere of connection and empathy that transcended the walls of that restaurant. The meeting was not merely a warning, but rather a movement for cultural transformation, where each employee was invited to reflect on their own prejudices and behaviors. Rachel used practical examples, real cases that demonstrated how discrimination can destroy not only careers, but entire lives. Every word was carefully chosen to provoke deep reflection, making that moment an experience of personal and collective growth. The story of Mrs. Maria Santos and her son Carlos quickly spread throughout San Francisco, becoming much more than a simple incident in a luxury restaurant. Each person who heard the account felt a mix of indignation and hope, understanding that small actions can trigger significant social transformations. Shares on social media multiplied the impact of that lesson, allowing the message of respect and dignity to transcend the physical boundaries of Chez Lumiere. The narrative served as a powerful reminder that prejudice does not only manifest in grand gestures, but primarily in the small and subtle microaggressions that occur daily. Carlos had transformed a moment of potential humiliation into a tool for education and awareness, proving that resistance can be silent yet extremely powerful. His attitude echoed like a soft but consistent cry against the deeply rooted structures of discrimination in society. Each person who became aware of the story was provoked to reflect on their own behaviors and privileges, questioning the invisible patterns of prejudice that often go unnoticed. The lesson went far beyond a simple confrontation in a restaurant. It represented a movement for social transformation, where empathy and respect became the primary tools for change. Mrs. Maria Santos, with her unwavering dignity, had become a symbol of resistance and hope. Though, your turn to make a difference. And now the moment of truth has arrived. How many times have you encountered situations of discrimination and pretended not to see? How many times have you silenced your voice when you should have shouted out loud? Look, change does not happen on its own. It needs you, me, and everyone who decides to be different. It's not just about watching a story, but about becoming the protagonist of your own transformation. Personal challenge: observe. Pay attention to the microaggressions around you. Question: do not accept the unacceptable act. Use your voice to defend those who cannot defend themselves. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. Antai, next steps. Share this story. Reflect personally. Commit to being different. Your omission is also a choice. What will yours be?